Aloha, my name is Solomon Robert Nui Inos. I'm the person who illustrated Heroes in Schools book. It was originally called Me'e Hawaii, and it is still Me'e Hawaii in many ways, because Me'e are the heroes, and the heroes of Hawaii and the heroes of these islands are really the heroes of the world. So as an artist, I've been exploring all kinds of ways to think about stories and telling stories. But it comes to a very simple idea, is that we can edit our own stories. And I think heroes are great editors. The Me'e themselves represented people who changed the story, changed the nature of their environment so that everything was winning, everyone was winning, everything was benefiting.
For the first time ever, a first volume of 20 illustrated photos of inspiring people whose contributions span politics, government, health, culture, and education.
The last story was going to be the hokulea. So the hokulea is not just the kumu, obviously. It's all the people that were associated with it. Isn't just a person. It isn't just a kumu. It isn't just an idea. It's the sense that now that we've gotten to these islands, what next?
Hi, aloha. I'm Kimo, and I am from Fatu along with my two colleagues, Sage and Ryan. And today we're going to be introducing you to a curriculum project that we're currently working on called Heroes in Schools. First, a little bit about Fatu and who we are. We are about 10 years old. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. Our roots are at the beginning where we met as students at the University of Hawaii English department a long time ago. We were all master's students. We used to get together on Saturdays and workshop works that we had been working on, as well as talking about a way to to contribute to our community. And this is where our mission statement came in. The mission statement of Fatu is to strengthen communities through literature. And what we have done over the past 10 years is something I'd like to review before we go into our present project. We have incorporated 3 curriculum books into our repository. The first one was done in 2009, and that was called the Statehood Project. And basically what that was is it was in cooperation and collaboration with Kumu Theater. It was a way of looking and reimagining the results of statehood, what that meant. What that meant to Hawaiians and non-Hawaiians, and what it meant for history if it had turned out another way. The second project that we did was curriculum anthology, where we invited over 30 teachers to contribute meaningful curriculum, literary arts curriculum that would help to supplement teachers' normal curriculum. It was one of those things where you could go to the book and try a tested and tried curriculum or lesson plan that had been done by not only a professional teacher, but a professional writer as well. And that book was amazing. It was sponsored by the Hawaii Nui Akea School for Hawaiian Knowledge. And it was a great project. And actually, free editions of that were recently passed out to teachers on the Kamehameha School's website because of COVID-19. So free editions of that are available to you. And now the most recent project that was incorporated into our catalog was a book called Aloha Ni'ihau, which looked at the narratives of 3 women from Ni'ihau. It was written in their own dialect, and it talks about their daily lives and some of the struggles that they have gone through in their own history. And the reason why that book was monumental is, well, for many reasons. It published a voice that is not often heard of. The authors were all women, Ni'ihau women, native speakers of Hawaiian, who were all over 70 years old. Actually, most of them, 2 were over 70 and 1 was about 50-ish. And that really got us started to discuss and have this conversation about how we could nurture our own students into telling their stories. And so working with Solomon Enos, a well-known Native Hawaiian artist, we got together and wrote a book called Heroes in Schools. And the premise of this book is nurturing and having students reimagine how they can bring out the hero in themselves. And before we talk more about that project, Sage and Ryan would like to talk about their own evolution as teachers and the things that have inspired them to not only teach, but to create as a way of expressing how you can fit Heroes in Schools into your own worldview. Sage.
Aloha, my name is Sage Takehiro. I am one of the founders of Fatu, and I started reading and writing from the age of 4 years old. So for 34 years, I've been reading and writing prolifically. I started writing chapbooks and stories in 6th grade. Because I was done with my reading requirements when I was in 4th grade, my elementary reading requirements. So I had like extra time during reading time, so I started writing. And then I kind of stopped because I had finished the entire R.L. Stein Fear Street series, and I started, it's kind of like predictable in the end, and I stopped being excited about the materials that were available to me at that age and in the place that I grew up in Hilo. So a lot of the stories that I read were not the kinds of stories that are available to Hawaiian kids today, or just kids in general in Hawaii. I think the reason for that is that it took a lot of time. Like before the 90s, Hawaiian language wasn't even really allowed to be taught in school. Hawaiian studies, anything really Hawaiian wasn't part of the educational standards. And today, like with schools like Kamehameha and our Kulakaya Puni, we have Hawaiian standards of learning. And Fat Ulu, I think, feeds that kind of childhood want to learn, childhood curiosity, because I started creating my own material through writing and through recording myself. I used to record myself on tape. Remember those days when you had the tape cassette? I used to make my own radio shows when I was in like 5th grade. But I started creating content because I didn't feel like I could connect to any of the content that I had access to. I couldn't connect to the stuff, the environments the settings that I had read about in books. And I couldn't connect to the environments that I was seeing on TV. So I started creating my own content, stuff that I thought that would be interesting for me to read. Fast forward to college, major in English and political science, decided that studying law, or at least taking the test to get into law school, was not for me. Continued on with a master's in English and got a master's with a focus in creative writing. So my honors seniors became my first and only single author publication. But I never intend to write. I never really intended to write books. I kind of just wrote, and the English department at UH Manoa called it creative writing, when really what I was doing is just recording conversations that I heard down at the beach, or writing down what I heard an uncle say, in passing, stuff that I thought was funny. And most of it is in Hawaiian Creole English, different dialects of Hawaiian English that you'll hear on different islands. But that's just how our people talk. That's just how they communicate from, the plantation days, having to figure out how to marry all these different languages in order to figure out how much do I pay you for a manapua, whatever. But I wrote like that. I wrote like how our people talk, and they tell you not to do that when you go to school and when you learn how to write. They tell you not to do that. But they called it creative writing and made it a book. And with Fat Ulu, I feel that I was able to draw out the writer in other people so that I wasn't the only one doing it. I wouldn't feel like this weird person typing stories away in my room. There were other people like me, and they were of all different ages and all different ethnicities, and they're all in Hawaii, and they all had things to say about Hawaii. And to me, Fat Ulu really quenched that thirst to get these Hawaiian stories out, to get our settings into books and into stories, and to really see ourselves in literature. That to me is what I find satisfying about being part of this group. So moving forward with what I do now, I teach, well, I do a lot of things. I'm a mom, but I also teach English at KS, the Kamehameha School's Hawaii campus. I teach juniors and seniors. So one of the things that stood out to me one day when I was teaching, I was reading the story, Hawaii Story by Hawaii's Queen by Lili'u Kalani. And she essentially wrote this to an American audience. So we study the rhetorical strategies that are embedded in that text and where the metaphors are. Anyways, I asked my students one day, who's your ali'i? What chief do you come from? What ahupua'a does your family come from? Who is the chief of that place? No answer. Maybe like one kid answered. Most kids from Hawaii Island should be able to say, Umialiloa, Keoua. You know, they should, whatever district they come from, they should know the chief of that district. And when I got no answer, I was like, okay, we need to get this book out ASAP. We need to get Heroes in Schools out ASAP, because people need to start learning about who they come from and why we're doing what we're doing to restore our āina and our living spaces, our fish ponds, our ways of thinking, our ike Hawaii, our educational systems, our language. We need to know why we're doing that and who it came from. But we also need to develop the skills to tell our own stories so that our future generations can know who they came from and the heroic acts that we had to overcome in our time. So it's really important for us to not only introduce people to literature, but also to draw literature out of people, I think, is one of our goals at Fat Ulu. And pretty much all the books or all of the material that we create, I think, has that intention to draw the mo'olelo out of the person who is participating, whether it's a workshop, whether they're an author, an artist, whether they're an audience, that we just want to wake up that mo'olelo within our reader. I'm ready for you, Ryan.
Thanks, Sage. Yeah, I'm excited about this project as well, and I love what Sage shared. Like, each of our projects has been an opportunity to bring different voices and different perspectives together. And so aloha, my name's Ryan Oishi. I'm a teacher, a kumu at Kamehameha School's Kapalama. This is just finished my 12th year teaching, and I teach freshmen in high school, and I do circle around, like, as a kumu, like, what am I going to be feeding my students? We have this gift of a year together. My students come from all parts of Oahu, the neighbor islands, and they bring these unique strengths, these unique perspectives. And that metaphor of makavalu, of bringing all of these perspectives together as a source of our strength, I think is very much at the core of what I try to do in my classroom. And I think what each of our projects with Fat Ulu has sort of represented, bringing voices and perspectives together, knowing that we're stronger because of that. So yeah, as Kimo was sharing, our most recent project with Heroes in Schools, I love, because I think in talking about it with Kimo and Sage, I have a hard time thinking about what is a more relevant question for this moment that we face now as a community. And I think so much of our ability to think about different paths and different futures moving forward, of course, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? There's so many olelo and stories from our past that we can learn together. And so I think Heroes in Schools gives us specific heroes from this place, this āina. So in my journey as a teacher, I think freshman year is a really important year. We start our year together with hi'iaka, and that hasn't always been the case. So it's kind of cool thinking about how as a kumu I've sort of evolved over time. We end the year now with olelo, and I think that book ending of those two mo'olelo for my students, I really love, because not only is it so clear of the potential that these protagonists have and that our students have, but as young protagonists in these mo'olelo, we get to see how they learn to become who they are, how they grow into that place. And I think it really resonates with students. Like Sage is saying, I think students are hungry for these stories. And teaching at Kamehameha schools, I do very much think not only about our students stepping into those roles as future leaders, but they are going to be creating the next stories, the next mo'olelo. Yeah, and to be able to enrich themselves and their perspectives from books and mo'olelo, like hi'iaka and umealiloa, and like Heroes in Schools, hopefully, if we're able to get it out into the community. It makes me excited about the future, and it makes me feel good, I think, for all of us as kumu, that we're fulfilling our responsibilities to prepare our students for the challenges that their generation will face when it's their turn. So yeah, some opening thoughts. Kimo, what do you think?
Thank you. It's always awesome to learn new things about your folks' journey, and to also hear some of the things, the strengths and some of the things that we need to overcome as we try and teach a nation, as we try and teach a generation. Things like looking for material that is relevant to where we're from, material that connects personages and characters in real life or in literary life to the place where you're born, the land that feeds you, your apua or your genealogy. Also to, now in the time of COVID, to face these ideas of how am I going to do this if I'm meeting a student online, where if they're in my class, I could just take their hand to the library, sit them down, and we could discuss something together. But now that they're they're so far away, only on a computer screen, how do we rectify that? And so Heroes in Schools helps a little bit to overcome those issues. What you have is 30 characters over Hawaiian history. This is just volume 1. And as Solomon said, it kind of was an organic process to look at me'e, heroes, and what makes them heroes. So let me tell you the funny thing. Not everyone is going to agree with the heroes that we chose for our first volume. Not everybody is going to agree with the reason why we chose them to be heroes and to be included in this book. Some of them
that was exactly me. Remember when I first read it, I was like, what about this one and this one and this one? And you're like, Sage, we're gonna get there. It's volume 1. I'm like, okay.
But what it does is it opens up a conversation, not only for us to look at people in Hawaiian history, but to look at those stances that they made, some over some in a one-shot deal over a small amount of time, and some who consistently provided care or leadership for their community over a long span of time. These are people to be discussed and to talked about, and to be discussed and talked about in classrooms, in families, and then eventually for the students to go to become their own learners and to go out into their own communities and talk to their grandparents and their aunties and their uncles and their parents to have a close-up view of someone that they idolize, their own hero. These kinds of curriculum will be built up and lesson plans will be built up over time on our website. But what we're merely trying to propose to you is for the first time, a text that makes no apologies of explaining who we are and what we are. A text that has Hawaiian art that is multi-layered, that includes pictures of people taken from real life photographic sources, if they're available, or pictures that were imagined over time. My favorite, there's two of my favorite stories in the book are of the Oahu chiefesses, Kūkaniloko and Kalani Manuia, who were mother and daughter. And over the time that they were leaders, they created a system of agriculture. They built so many fish ponds and so many, they said that the land all the way from Halawa Valley all the way to Pearl Harbor was covered in taro leaf, in taro leaf and taro plants. This kind of mass agricultural system has not been seen in Polynesia since. And what it did was it made us easier to understand why when Captain Cook came, there could be so many people on the island, because of two things that these women ruler had done. Those kinds of stories need to be familiar to our students. Just as how if I ask who is the first president of the United States and everyone can respond George Washington, we need to understand who was the first king of Oahu, who made boundary markers that utilized the water resources of the island to make sure that every land base, every ahupua'a, and every moku had fresh water and the supplies that people needed in order to live. Some of these stories are profound, and some of them are, all of them are inspiring. The first phase of our project is we already have our website up, and we are at the point now where we're looking for contributions so that we can publish these books and send them to all the different primary schools and then eventually secondary schools. We think it's important, even if you don't subscribe to the idea of Heroes in Schools, that you kind of come along with us and support us with your spirit to say, okay, Fat Ulu, we understand what you're doing, mai kai, because that means a lot to us. And to know that this project really came from the heart, and it is still being expressed as a project with the best intentions, and that is to have our next generation find the heroes in themselves.
Definitely.
I feel like
I think we should play a game. I think we should play a game that if you come to our social media, to our Instagram or to our Facebook, if you come and engage with us there, we can either turn you on to some materials or give you the links to the materials that we have free online. If you're a writer and you want to get your voice out, if you're young, you're old, I don't care what kind of degree you have, if you have something that you feel you need to express, send it over to us. And if we approve of it, and if it's healthy and if it's in alignment with what we're trying to do, we'll put it up on our blog.
fatulu.com and heroesinschools.org. And we're going to put a link to all of our, how do we do it? A link to all of our social media.
You
Ryan can do this. Ryan, can I do this? And you do it right here or something, however they do it.
You gotta, don't mind us. We're kind of, is middle age a word? Do people still say that? I prefer
eccentric.
Okay. So we're kind of, matured. Yeah, we're kind of matured, which means that the new stuff, marketing on social media and getting information out in a timely manner when you're trying to potty train your kids and they're running around is, when you're flying, Kimo, for example, just came in from China. I mean,
we're trying.
Ryan,
that's what she's saying, we're trying.
Yeah, Ryan is a parent. Like, you gotta just be patient with us, because Fat Ulu is our very own personal investment. We never benefited personally we never made any personal financial gains. Whatever money we make in Fat Ulu stays in Fat Ulu and goes to putting books in the community. And in the case of Heroes in Schools, whatever money you share with us, or whatever share on Instagram, or whatever post on Facebook, or whatever submission you want to give us to post on our blog, all of that is going to go towards our effort to put Heroes in Schools.
And in heart.
Yeah.
That's what we should have called it. We should have called it Heroes in Hearts.
In heart.
Heroes in Minds. I don't know.
This is how we get when we almost pow. Pretty soon, somebody gonna start falling asleep.
I would like to thank the people who invited us, especially Chelsea Keeney from Kamehameha Schools, as well as a personal shout out to Kanaeokana, and to all of you teachers out there working the hard struggle, fighting the hard fight. Thank you very much for hanging out with us today, and we hope you have a great day.